Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock, time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a good weekend. Not a great weekend, again, for the Browns. Just 3 points against the Dolphins in a 20-3 loss to Miami in the final regular season home game of the season. So take a look at this. Ian Rappaport earlier in the day. Despite the stunning slide to 3-12 this season, Browns have no plans to move on from two-time Coach of the Year Kevin Stefanski. Other staff changes are possible. Mike Vrabel, who joined the Browns coaching staff as a consultant after he was fired the past offseason, effectively became the offensive line coach, leaving a void in the likely event he lands elsewhere in this cycle. Similarly to Max Crosby, superstar pass rusher Myles Garrett said he wants to learn the team's plans before committing to Cleveland. So we'll be watching. He'll be watching this very closely as well. That's from Ian Rappaport yesterday, before the 1 o'clock window of games. Let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Jeff, Vrabel's contract as a consultant expired, so he's free to go and interview and do whatever he did. We learned that earlier today. Myles Garrett, I think what Myles Garrett is saying is, I don't want to be a part of a really big rebuild, which means he pretty much wants it to be a tweak as opposed to a complete overhaul. That's the way, when I hear that, that means, Myles, if you intend on bringing in a new coach and a new GM and stripping it down, I'm out.
I definitely think, and I think this is where people probably misunderstood it. I did take it kind of as a, hey, I kind of like the guys we're working for. If there was any way you were probably going to take that maybe there was a slight to it, my honest belief is it's got to be about the quarterback position. Look, Myles is no fool. He's been in this league for a long time. You look at the teams they faced this year, he can look right at the teams in the AFC that are going to the playoffs and say, well, the Chiefs have Mahomes, and Buffalo has Josh Allen, of course, and Baltimore has Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert in Los Angeles for the Chargers. And you can see, what a lack of having, the guy at that position has done for this team. And, the Browns will have a lot of maneuverability and still be able to, be players in this offseason. But somehow, some way, they absolutely have to just find the answer of what is going to be the guy. And, they tried to make the DeShaun thing work, and obviously it's failed miserably, and at times they were basically able to hedge their bets and, have other quarterbacks be able to play and perform when either DeShaun was suspended or DeShaun was injured, like we saw the last couple of years. But that was nothing that was going to be sustainable. You're not always going to be able to, find plan B every single year. And this year they weren't able to. It's not about plan B anymore. It's about finding a new plan A. And, this team will perform better if they get, the quarterback play they need. And it's simple, the success we saw from Jameis Winston, and obviously, it was limited. This team's got to throw the ball down the field. You want to throw 47 times and throw, 35 passes under 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. You're asking for a completion percentage, north of 80. It's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. The Browns need to find a quarterback. And, look, whether or not, Joel comes back, I don't know. Joel's decision is going to come down to his health is probably the way it's going to be. But, Myles needed to say what needed to be said. He needed to let this team know that, look, guys, we gave this 3 years. It's not working. And I'm not really in the business of sticking around for a fourth because he just does not believe it'll work the way it currently is.
All right, so the other thing that happened, the Browns adjusted DeShaun Watson's contract over the weekend. Ian Rappaport, NFL Network, has more.
The Cleveland Browns made some news this week as it pertains to their quarterback position, agreed to terms with DeShaun Watson on an adjusted contract. No, he did not give up his $92 million fully guaranteed. What this did was ease the cap burden in a couple years in the event he is no longer the quarterback for them. But what this really did was make sure everyone knew DeShaun Watson will be back in Cleveland next year. I would expect some competition, though. Wouldn't be surprised if it's veteran competition. Aaron Rodgers, if he's not on the Jets, would be one potential option. Kirk Cousins, Rich, another one.
We'll get to those in a minute, but what the Watson adjustment has likely done is it moved back the void date on the contract, added dummy salaries to 27 and 28. It'll allow The Browns the opportunity to designate him as a post-June 1st release in 2027, spreading out what will likely be $89.5 million of dead cap over a couple of years when it's all said and done. So they're kind of hedging their bets, moving towards an exit strategy. They will have some options, but it's designed to give them some flexibility with the cap.
I mean, the people who get so upset about this is no difference. I mean, have you ever refinanced your mortgage? Have you ever refinanced your car loan? And, hey, I can no longer afford that $400 payment, but I can afford $300. Is there any way we can extend this from 1 year to 2? The same money is still there. But what it is it gives the Browns maneuverability to still field a roster that can be competitive. And, everybody, we'll just be done with it, eat the $92 million. And then when the Browns went 1-16 next year, guess what everybody would say? What were you doing? You could have had a chance. You're never going to appease everybody. And this was probably going to happen any way you sliced it with DeShaun Watson's contract. And they do it with everybody. As soon as, you are 1 or 2 years into your deal, they convert most of your money into, basically, into bonuses and lower what your actual cap hit is. Everybody still gets their same money. This has gone on for a long time with the Browns. It went on for a long time with the New Orleans Saints. It's just, I think anytime anything is associated to DeShaun Watson and his money, it's going to anger the masses. And look, I get it. Look, it wasn't our money, but, that money could have spent elsewhere to, you could have tried to chase down 4 quarterbacks and hopefully one of those guys hit. But it's just, basically the managing of money. How DeShaun is here, in what capacity, I don't think any of us truly know. I mean, I'm assuming he would start next year on the PUP list. And we'll see how much of a rush DeShaun is to actually get back to playing football. He's getting his money. It was a move the Browns did so they can still be competitive. They can still make some moves in free agency because, look, a draft is not going to solve everything, and the needs on this team are quite numerous. Let's just not kid ourselves.
The other thing is, though, that by making that move, it's kind of a sign that they're not going full rebuild. That means we're tweaking. We're trying to make the roster competitive. We don't think we're a 3-win team. We think we're more like an 8-9-win team that played like garbage on offense is kind of what they're saying. So I would expect them to do a lot of work and spend a lot of money on offense. And here's another thing from the Bleach Report. Every team's move to make now for the Browns, they say get ready to pitch Kirk Cousins. And they say if Cousins is cut, remember, Kirk Cousins has a no-trade clause. He can force his way out of the Falcons by being cut, and it would be a Russell Wilson type of deal in the free agency. Now, the question will be, when you look at it, Jeff, we don't know what his relationship with Kevin Stefanski was like. We assume it was pretty good. And is there somebody else? Does he want to go back to, Minnesota? If Minnesota doesn't want to pay Sam Darnold, does he want to go back there because J.J. McCarthy is coming off an injury? So it's not like Kirk Cousins' only option is going to be the Browns, but there is the relationship with Kevin Stefanski.
Certainly there is a relationship there. The things you're going to think is, will Kirk Cousins next year, will he be a little bit more healthy? Will he have a little bit more mobility? Those were things that certainly hampered him this year. I know there's some reports that maybe, Atlanta felt like there was just nothing left, and if that's the case, let's not go praising Atlanta for saying, let's make the switch. You were the one that signed him to the deal. But yes, Kirk Cousins can very much similarly do what Derek Carr did, with the Raiders and said, I'm not going where you want me to go. I'm going to go where I want to go. So therefore, yes, you have to release me. And look, Kirk Cousins, and you tell me it's less than $2 million, regardless. And if you say it's a wild card, we don't know what he has left. I would rather spend almost $2 million on a guy I'm not sure what he has left, as opposed to, putting $250 into a guy that it would take in time off. Yes, DeShaun Watson had a more impressive track record at the time. It's certainly a name to look at, but then, of course, there are other options. If you're Kirk Cousins, do you want to go play in Northeast Ohio at what will be 37 years old and your body isn't what it used to be? Are you going to look to say, hey, I'll just take a really nice backup job, hey, in Detroit Lions or, something where maybe I don't have to play very often, but when I do, I'm in a good position to do so. The relationship was pretty good as far as playing. When Kirk was with Coach Stefanski, completion percentage was high. Found a way to excel with Coach Stefanski. Certainly, his last game when the two of them together wasn't that great. A playoff game in San Francisco. San Francisco was dominant at the time. It's certainly one of the big names you're going to look at right now. But I mean, you're in a point now where if you're the Browns, you're bringing in minimum 2 quarterbacks. My guess would be 3. And, do you want to go a Kirk Cousins route? Do you want to kick the tires on a Daniel Jones, draft a quarterback as well? Yes, it is the most important position in the NFL, but the Browns basically have to throw as many darts at it as possible. Yes, you currently hold the number 3 overall pick in this draft, which probably would put you in position to take one of the top 2 guys. But, you're not just going to draft the guy to say you drafted a quarterback, especially, I'm not saying they're on life support as far as their job security is concerned, but they're also not, in high favor as far as their job security is concerned either.
Jeff Lloyd and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll take a more in-depth look at some of the mock drafts that are going with the Browns at number 3. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries home for the holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, love the show. So if the Browns don't get a quarterback in the top of the draft, do you see them taking a quarterback at all in this draft? And how far do you think the DeShaun Watson trade has set the franchise back? Or do you think it's Jimmy Haslam that set him back because he's the one who made him make that trade happen? So I'm just curious, do you see them drafting a quarterback at all? And if they don't get a top quarterback, who do you see them looking at, like, style-wise later in the draft? And we know that the DeShaun Watson trade set us back, but how far did it set us back? Go Browns. Woo, woo, woo.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Jeff, it's an interesting question. Yes, they're going to draft a quarterback. They may draft 2 quarterbacks because I think we've seen enough of DTR to know, he needs to be a lot better. As far as how far look, I liked the trade when they made it. They swang big and they missed on the DeShaun Watson. Probably set them back a little bit because you traded 3 first-round picks. Sent back a couple of years without question.
Oh, there's, no question of that. You know what I'm saying? We also keep in mind, though, maybe there's a really good chance one of those picks obviously would have been a quarterback, which you have, certainly a thought process. That's the way it would have went. And which, maybe if you never made that move, maybe you wouldn't be in the position you are in now, certainly. But, again, look, you can't go basically back and, unspill the milk, so to speak. So you look at it and look, you're in a position right now. And this is the thing where I think it was really important for the Browns to get into this top 3 of this draft position. Because you look at Shedeur Sanders, you look at Cam Ward. I don't know if either of these guys are ones I would want to trade up for. I think it's a lot more palatable if, you are there and you can just take them. There's going to be teams that are going to have conversations, and whether or not, Sanders or Ward pan out, it's one thing to take them when they fell to you. It's another thing, like the Browns did, make that gamble for the guy and then him turn out to not be the guy. I agree that the Browns absolutely should draft a quarterback. It's going to be weird this year. Last year, look, it really worked out well for the quarterbacks. They all went high. And, other than J.J. McCarthy, who we did not get to see play, everything looked pretty good for everybody else as far as, the decisions they made. Now, the problem you have is when you're going to have a weak quarterback class, you are now going to have quarterbacks who are probably going to get overdrafted. Now, with that, more pressure goes on the young guys. Certainly anybody that's going to come to Cleveland, the pressure is going to be very high on them. That is certainly why you are going to need a veteran in place, if not 2 veterans, and, however DeShaun works into all of this equation. Me, I kind of like Jackson Dart from Ole Miss. I like a guy, he can just throw it all over the field. Certainly needs to be more disciplined. He did not end well at Ole Miss, with some turnovers. But, I just like the overall game. He's still very, very young, which maybe says I bring him in here, and my thoughts and expectations are to hopefully not play him as a rookie. I want him to, digest. I want him to learn everything. It's not normally a route I would go with most quarterbacks. I don't know how much you actually learn by not playing. But the fact that he is just 21, and I believe he'll be 21 when he's drafted, and now when we're getting to these quarterbacks for 4, minimum 5 years, if not more, you look at that. But yeah, I want a guy that's at least shown he can complete passes. Dart has a nice completion percentage, a lot of yards, touchdown passes. That's the guy I'm looking at. But my concern certainly with this class is with any of these quarterbacks, once you get past those top 2, they're going to go higher than you think just because it's quarterbacks and everybody, is kind of in a position like the Browns. Everybody always needs quarterbacks. Jalen Milroe is definitely a wild card here yet. We don't really have anything from Jalen Milroe one way or the other. He's at a school like Alabama, and Alabama could easily hand over some serious money to somebody in the portal, or one of those things where maybe Jalen Milroe makes a decision and it's not truly his decisions. Maybe you don't ever want to see a kid go pro because he had to, because maybe they're giving his job away, which is certainly things that are going to happen nowadays in the NCAA. But this class, it's just not there as far as numbers. It's not extremely deep. And when I say deep, even just a lot of quarterbacks, it's just not really there this year. So, look, I mean, obviously the diligence has been put into Shedeur Sanders to this point and Cam Ward to this point. The question is, do you like them or do you love them? And, that ultimately what it would come down to. Me, personally, I wouldn't be stunned if the Browns just say, let's get in this room what we can. Veteran, a later pick, maybe a Jackson Dart, trade out of 3. And, because the Browns always love to have their assets and say, look, we think the 26th class will be a lot more promising. Maybe we'll hedge our bets and see where we are come 2026.
All right, so here is a mock draft from Josh Edwards, CBSSports.com. He has Hunter going to the Patriots run. Remember, they have Drake May, so they're not going to take a quarterback. Number 2, he's got McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, going to the Titans. He has the Browns taking Cam Ward at number 3. Would probably be more inclined to sign Kirk Cousins, draft a quarterback on day 2, but cannot pass up the opportunity to select Cam Ward at number 3 if the Browns do not go quarterback. Offensive tackle, best player available would be preferred path. They have the Giants selecting Shedeur Sanders at number 4 right after the Browns. I'm with you. I'm not a quarterback guru. I've seen Cam Ward play a couple of times. I don't look at him and think, man, he's going to light the NFL up.
The one thing I like about Cam Ward, is you see a lot of vertical balls. Mm-hmm. And this is what you need, and this is what you see. You saw it with Joe Flacco last year. We saw it with Jameis Winston. And, look, there was some success with Jameis Winston. Granted, there was more failures than success. But, not throwing the ball down the field or not even trying, it's not doing anything. We saw it happen with DeShaun Watson. We've seen it with DTR. What we've seen from some quarterbacks that have succeeded with the Stefanski system is, I'm going to throw it deep, come hell or high water. I understand there's probably, some chances I'm going to turn the ball over, but, dink and dunk and dink and dunk. It's not a recipe to be successful in the NFL. You got to throw vertical to hopefully open up the underneath. It doesn't work the other way around in the NFL. And the other thing is you can't fake it in the NFL. If defenses can see after 3, 4, 5 pass attempts, this guy's got no inclination to going deep. This guy has no confidence to go deep, doesn't trust his offensive line or fears the pass rush too much. It's just like, dogs that become salivating. Those are what you need. You need guys who are just going to throw it down the field. And you saw the Jerry Jeudy emergence. Why? Because they started throwing the ball vertically. And you saw why Jerry Jeudy, can be a great player in this league. Yesterday, 12 for 84. Jerry Jeudy's not going to excel on this underneath stuff. But even still, you can excel on the underneath stuff when you hit some vertical and then you create yards after the catch. It's going to be tough. My gut tells me that the Browns would probably love to trade out just because I think as severe as the hole is for them at the quarterback position, it may not be the smartest decision to make, to basically bring somebody in who's just going to be viewed as a franchise savior. Look, we saw how this worked out once, and in 2018 it was great. And, by 2021, it was a really, really bad situation for that said quarterback. Do you look for, the retreads? And there's a bunch of them out there. Justin Fields, Daniel Jones. And I'm not saying any of these guys are going to hit, but at least these guys come in and, what they're coming in with is, I know why I failed originally. And hopefully you go to a place where they say, hey, look, this is what you had problems with in this league. So we are going to work our way. We're going to navigate around, or we're going to work on it. It's going to be a lot different. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of changes probably to the offensive line. You have no idea what your running game can look like in 2025. There's a lot that's going to go into this. And I'm just not sure if, banking on, a Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, who probably maybe would have been 5th out of the quarterback class last year, maybe 6th. So, you can't just say you take the quarterback. It's got to be that the quarterback is worthy of being taken, because, they make this, they're lucky they're going to get to make this decision a second time. There will be no third.
Well, here's the other thing. Wherever you pick in the first round, I'm assuming even if you trade back, it'll be top 10. You can't miss. You have so many holes and needs. If you miss, your last season with the Browns will be next season. You simply can't miss with an early first round pick.
Has to be a player of impact. There is no question. And especially, it's got to be a player of impact, because keep in mind, you haven't been in this round in 3 years now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Jeff Lloyd, Locked On Browns podcast, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
All the best, Dave. Everybody, tough season. Let's hang in there. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Hopefully, again, 2025 brings some brighter days.
Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Always good stuff, the Locked On Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Lance Reisland, plain dealer, cleveland.com. We will take a look at 3 recurring problems for the Browns offense that showed up again against the Dolphins. Film breakdown, video analysis with Lance Reisland. Straight ahead, stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Howard from Marin County. I have a question for you. Now that the Browns are going to be picking 3rd, and since I certainly don't trust the people that we have right now, like our general manager and our talent evaluators, to make the right picks, who would you choose to become the person who could assess talent and who could run the draft? Because it certainly shouldn't be Barry, because he's been bad. And the other thing would be is Miles is like Jim Brown for all of us old people who remember him. So we have to do everything we can to keep Miles, because he really is once-in-a-generation talent. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Lance, I don't know the name of the talent evaluator that I would bring in to draft. It wouldn't be John Dorsey. I'm not as down on Andrew Berry's draft as I know a lot of fans are. I will say the Jedrick Wills draft pick was a huge miss. It's interesting. You can't. I don't think at this point in time you can shift to somebody to come in and do the draft unless you're completely overhauling the entire organization. And if you do that, I think Myles Garrett, Joel Bitonio, and a lot of those veterans aren't going to want to be here, because that means full-bore rebuild.
Well, for me, this is an interesting question as the Browns move forward, because they've struggled. And the first thing it tells me is you can see and we've all been a part of it as football coaches, what losing does, right? Everybody is judging and, questioning everything that everybody does. And that's normal when you lose, especially when you have expectations. That's what makes this year so hard, is the expectations coming into the season with the idea that they might have the first pick in the draft if some things pan out this week. That's kind of a crazy thing. I'd never really heard of that. A team that had Super Bowl expectations and then, now has the first pick in the draft. For me, I think it's important that they get some consulting in terms of, we've made these mistakes, maybe reach out and ask some people. I think it's got to be these people. I think it's got to be Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, but I would lean more on Kevin Stefanski. I would lean more on what he wants and within his offense and within his structure and within his culture. It seems like there's a disconnect in terms of what they're picking and what Kevin Stefanski needs or what they're getting for in free agency. So for me, I would lean more on Kevin Stefanski. If you're going to have Kevin Stefanski as your coach, it hasn't worked the other way. So maybe you lean on him a little bit to get what he wants from his offense and, and from his team as a whole.
Yeah, and so just as a point of reference, and I get the people that are looking at the drafts that Andrew Berry has had and looking at it and saying, tell me who he has drafted. I understand that. If you want to go down that road, if Jimmy Haslam decides to go down that road, and I'm not saying firing Andrew Berry, what I would do is I would hire a vice president of football operations who both Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski would report to, and that guy would then report to Haslam. Right now they both report directly to Haslam. But I would make it a football guy, and that's the way so he's getting input from Berry on the personnel side, from Stefanski on that, and kind of directing the way things go.
Well, that's a very interesting thought. For me, it's sometimes there's too many hats in the game of football, right? There's too many decision makers. There's too many people in the kitchen, right? So where the Browns are at right now, they still have a talented roster at so many positions. So I would leave that. I wouldn't want somebody else having to go through Kevin Stefanski. I would want Kevin Stefanski. If you're gonna change up coordinators or whatever they're planning on doing, and some things are gonna happen after the season. If you're going to put all the pressure on Kevin Stefanski, then allow him to go out with his guys. Allow him to go out with people he wants. That would be my thought. The idea of having a third party is never bad, though, because that party is usually a non-emotional or a non-temperament. But they need, just like in every line of football, you need football people. You need people who love to watch film. You need people who just like the game of football and understand what they're watching and why they like the players that they like. As I watch this stuff, there's too many things, and I understand there's a certain size and speed, but there's too much on, the guardrails that we hear all the time. Go find some football players. Browns need football players.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, we're going to take a film breakdown video analysis of 3 issues that the Browns offense continues to struggle with, and they continued to struggle with yesterday against the Dolphins in that loss. So the first one on the list, 47 passes, way too many, and I don't think anybody would argue with you making that point.
Well, if you look at this play, right, you're going to see he just doesn't see the middle backer. They're in cover 2. It's kind of like a Tampa 2 where that middle linebacker is going to go, but he doesn't drop immediately, so it tells me more he's just getting some depth on his drop. But it's kind of the Tampa 2 concept where that middle linebacker is going to get great depth. He's got to be able to get over top of that middle linebacker and before the safeties. But the point being is that, this is not a down and distance where you need to throw a vertical. And there's so many things that the Browns are doing that are setting this young man up for failure. And the big one is throwing the ball 47 times. I understand he's only had 1 touchdown and 7 interceptions, but throwing the ball 47 times is not setting him up for success. They need to be able to run the ball, which they have not been able to do. They need to find playmakers where, they have Judy, but they've had other injuries and people who have either are not a part of the game plan or not getting touches or not getting open. But 47 times with a backup quarterback doesn't make a lot of sense, especially on second and medium or second and manageable. Those run-pass downs that we like to say as coordinators, well, the Browns, that should be a little bit more run. And people say, well, they can't run the ball. Well, they won't run the ball. That's the difference. And I understand they can't, but they have to continually do that so they're not getting this linebacker is getting 20 yards downfield because he knows his pass. This is not a good recipe for success for a backup quarterback.
All right, so 47 pass attempts, too many. And number 2 on these 3 recurring issues, something you kind of alluded to. They just do not have a run game.
We're going to see this first one. They're going to be a toss here. There's no movement. You can see the line of scrimmage stays right there. Miami guys all have their hands on. They're pushing the offensive line back. And then the same thing here. You're getting no vertical displacement, which is a fancy way of saying, I don't say it that way. They're not knocking anybody backwards. And I remember my offensive line coach always say vertical displacement and all these football terms. There comes a point where the offensive line has to knock people backwards. And when I went and watched these guys for 2 camps with Callahan, and I'm not blaming anyone, but there's got to be, being an offensive lineman in the NFL, just like a defensive lineman, it's got to be miserable at times because they have to continuously be physical and block. And the Browns aren't doing that right now. A lot of the same guys, for some reason, they're not getting any movement on their double teams. They're making things hard. Their hands don't seem in the right spot. Their footwork's not as good as it was. This is something they need to address. And I'm not necessarily saying they need a new offensive line coach. They need to address the issues they have, and that's the inability to get movement up front.
All right, 3 of the 3rd recurring problems for the Browns. The offense is putting the defense in play-perfect mode, so take us through that.
Well, there's a play Delpit gets you. So this is a zone read with a bluff, and the bluff means the guy that usually comes in motion, Jonnu Smith, you'll see it again. The guy right on the edge by Myles Garrett, he releases to the flat. And if it was a normal zone, he would either come across the formation or block Myles Garrett. Well, this is the kind of what the next step is, triple option, right? So they're going to read Myles Garrett, and then Huntley can either throw it or pass it. And Delpit plays this very well because Delpit's got to also has some run responsibility here. He just misses. But the point is that the Browns have to play perfect defense because the offense is so poor and the special teams is so poor this year that the defense, which I thought played outstanding yesterday. They were gap sound. They flew around. They had some issues, but they played really good against an offense that's very hard to prepare for in a short week. So, again, this is the play by Delpit. I thought he played it very well. Again, Huntley's, this is triple option. He could hand the ball off, he could run it, or he could throw it, and he decided to throw it, and Delpit just missed. But this is the idea of complementary football is what wins games. And the Browns offense has not done their part this year along with special teams. The defense, for the most part, has.
Yeah, I would agree. And we'll get a little bit more into that after we take a quick timeout. Looking forward as to where you move relative to the draft and free agency. That's coming up on Sports4CLE. Lance Reisland and I continue talking Browns. We'll be right back after this timeout.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries home for the holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh,
thanks, hon. And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
This is Big John from Columbus. The Browns will be all right. If they do everything strategically and the draft, if you essentially come out to number 1 and somebody want to move up and they offer you a boatload of picks, you play it smart, you can come out and be in the playoff again next year if you play the cards right. Free agency, and some people you don't have to cut, like a BTR, clean up that running back room, or keep Chubb and get some other people to help him out, and maybe even bring back Huntley as a backup quarterback. But let's play it smartly. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all those voicemails. Lance, I know it's not a popular opinion right now, but I tend to agree. If they need to work on the offensive line, I think they probably need another running back because you're not sure what Nick Chubb is. I think you need another receiver. You need a couple pieces on the offensive line. I think the defense has some talent, and I think the offense has been so bad, as you alluded to at the end of last segment. It's put the defense in a big hole.
Well, I'm a big believer football starts up front on both sides of the ball. So if the Browns want to draft an offensive line, Will Campbell kid out of Tech, there's a bunch of guys that are really, really good tackles, guards. It's more of a guard-centered draft right now as I get into my draft prep. But it's always okay for me to draft up front because you win up front, and you've seen that with the lack of run game. you draft those guys up front, you run the ball a little bit, put you in second medium, you're always in good shape. So I'm never at fault with drafting offensive linemen. But I agree, they need some playmakers. They need an influx of talent. They need an influx of juice, I'd like to say, because that's what's happening right now. They're unable to spread the field. Jerry Jeudy's doing a really nice job, and I think Njoku. But I think really one of their big issues they have to address this offseason is their injuries and how they train and what they do. The Browns have had way too many injuries, soft tissue injuries, concussions, things like that. So they, again, it just comes down to how are they doing it? How are they practicing? Because something's going on, because the injuries over the last 2 years seem even more for the Browns than the rest of the NFL. So that would be where I start, even before I start thinking about draft picks.
Yeah, I would agree. They also have to decide what they're doing offensively. That offense that has been run out there, boy, I hope we don't see that again. I would much rather Kevin Stefanski be calling the plays in his offense. All right, this is from CBSSports.com. 2025 New Year resolutions for each NFL team. For the Browns, they say replace DeShaun Watson. They can't fully escape the ailing quarterback's contract just yet, but they also cannot operate as if he is the present or the future under center. It's time for real change. Again, he's injured, so we'll see. But I think it's if you bring veteran quarterbacks in, it's got to be a competition, and we haven't seen that. Kevin Stefanski has kind of defined roles, but this is a different era. And to your point, they got to play in the preseason. They got to have more. They have to have the maximum amount possible of padded practices where they are playing football. I think that's been missing the last couple of years.
Well, this is from my dad, but my dad always felt you had to hit. You have to hit every day. You don't have to kill each other. And I think the key is not bringing yourself to the ground, because obviously when you hear pads cracking, that's okay, because that's pads on pads. That doesn't cause injury. And obviously if you're learning how to tackle and getting your head out of the way. But I agree. When I watch practice every day, I feel, and once again, I'm more old school, but I think the contact helps you and it gets you ready for the season, and it acclimates you more than the idea of staying fresh. And that's kind of where the Browns have been in terms of just trying to figure out how are they going to get their guys healthy and get them ready to go. Because obviously what they've done hasn't worked very well, and they're going to have to figure out. In terms of Watson, how about Watson comes in and has to run Stefanski's offense, and then he's in a competition. Everything they've done over the last 3 years is try to make it work for Watson. And I agree with that, because he was a great player when they got him. Now he's a guy who maybe he's on decline a little bit, but he's still a very good player, I believe. Let's have him run Stefanski's offense. If he's not the best guy, then move on.
Yeah, again, I don't have an issue with that, but it can't be, if you're going to say it's an open competition, it can't be weighted towards a guy that has a big contract, because you've went down that road this year. I don't want to go back. That road leads to 3 wins. That's a road I want to avoid at all costs. This is from ESPN. Questions, takeaways from every NFL team after Week 17. For the Browns, is the number 1 pick in the 2025 draft in play for the Browns? They say very much so. Currently hold the 3rd spot in the draft. They would get the top pick with a loss to the Ravens and victories by the Patriots and Titans, who will be facing the Bills and Texans, respectively. Those teams are probably resting their starters. They have the most surprising performance, Jerry Jeudy, career-high 12 catches on Sunday. You know what? You look at that, the first pick could be there. And my cautionary tale is, if you don't think Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward are franchise quarterbacks, trade back. Don't take the best quarterback in a draft where nobody is going to be a franchise quarterback.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I'm actually in the midst of starting my Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders debate, and I'm sure I'll hear a lot about that and people. But I actually like Cam Ward a little bit as a quarterback right now, early on. But I think Shedeur Sanders fits what Kevin Stefanski wants to do if they go back to Kevin Stefanski's offense. These guys who are off-platform, off-structure quarterbacks, they do not work in Kevin Stefanski's offense. And if you're going to have him call plays, Shedeur Sanders is more of a pro style. He's got good feet, but he's more of a pro style guy, a guy who can, make plays from the pocket, use his checkdowns, things like that, more like Flacco and Jameis Winston, obviously without the interceptions. But I'm with you. If you don't think that that's guy, or do you think a guy like Travis Hunter or a guy like the Luther Burden kid out of Missouri? There's some guys there. They need some different makers, and they need some guys who bring, and you and I have talked about this a long time, guys who, even Jerry Jeudy's a guy who has to run a route. They need guys they can give the ball to, hand it to it, throw it to them, do whatever they got to do. A-Chain from Miami, for example, and just get some easy yards. And I don't know what that answer is. I don't know, obviously we'll see what happens with this weekend. And as you get into the draft stuff, it'll be interesting, but I've not got to work on the draft when the Browns have a first-round pick, and I look forward to doing that because there's some guys out there that I really think could change the trajectory of this organization because they do have a lot of talent at a lot of positions.
Yeah, again, you cannot miss if it's a top 10 pick, even, and it's probably going to be top 3. You can't miss. You cannot miss on that pick. I mean, Jedrick Wills was a miss at 10. You can't miss with high first-round picks. You just can't. All right, before we go to break, this is why I think they need to draft lots of offense. The Browns fell to 1-12 when scoring less than 20 points in a game this season. So in 13 of the games, they failed to reach 20 points. They're 2-1 when scoring 20-plus points. You can talk about the grease boards and drawing up all. The goal of an offense is to score points, and this offense has scored more than 20 points 3 times. That's why you've won 3 games.
Well, I think you said it best, right? So it has to do with the philosophy, and I'm never, you go like college, wing T, and the air raid, and all the different styles of offense. That's really not up for argument for me. What the Browns are doing is grab bag. And I've been there before as an offense coordinator where you're just not sure what you're good at and you're just not sure how to run things. You don't set anything up and you're just kind of reaching in a bag and you're trying to get guys the ball and it just doesn't work. And that's what's happening with the Browns. So the first thing they got to do is they got to create an identity. And whether you like Kevin Stefanski's offense or not, you knew what their identity was. They were going to run the ball really, really well. They were going to take some shots. They were going to use big personnel and get empty and do things like that. They were going to be super aggressive and innovative in the red zone, and that's all gone. So they went from an offense that was pretty good, but wanted to be great with DeShaun Watson, and has end up going the opposite way. So I think the first thing they do, when it comes to scoring points, is sticking to your identity and sticking to what you are, whatever that is. I've said it over and over, and I live by that as a football coach. It's not what the plan is. That's not up for. It's do you have a plan? And right now, offensively, they do not have a plan.
Lance Reisland and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, turn our attention to the Ohio State Buckeyes getting ready to play Oregon for a chance to advance to the college football playoffs semifinals. 3 keys for Ohio State to beating Oregon. Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Sports4CLE continues. Take a look at this. So Mike Vrabel's contract with the Browns has actually expired today. It was by design, so he could go and kind of explore head coaching opportunities. As Adam Schefter tweeting this out, and now Field Yates also kind of retweets it. Jets, Saints, and Bears are 3 openings that currently exist. And there is also that rumor heading out there that if Ohio State moves on from Ryan Day after the season, Mike Vrabel would be a guy that they would be interested in. Of course, he played for the Buckeyes. So Vrabel likely to get. I got to believe he's been an NFL head coach and a pretty good one. I would assume he wants to be an NFL head coach, and I imagine he's pretty high on all of the teams that are going to be looking for an NFL head coach's list.
Well, yeah, you know what, and good for him. I think he did a great job as coming in and helping. But I will say this: I think he's an NFL guy. Reading a bunch of stuff, and I've talked to some people who are close with Coach Vrabel, And he doesn't seem to really like what college football is becoming with his NIL and recruiting and things like that. Coaching college football right now has got to just be one of the most challenging things you can do as a football coach at any level. There's so much going on with NIL, and now you have agents, and you still have school and classes. It's the wild west. So I see him staying in the NFL. Obviously one of the Browns fans love Vrabel, and rightfully so. He's a great player at Walsh. He's a great player with the Buckeyes. He's had a ton of success. I think what the Browns need to do in terms of like Vrabel did when he was at the Titans is just find some continuity. They need to find guys who believe in what Kevin Stefanski is doing. One of the things that my dad always said is let your coaches coach, and I agree with that. And it's just the same thing with Stefanski. Let Stefanski run his offense. If you don't like what he does, then get rid of him. But don't make him do things he's unable to do. Let's get guys who work for him, do for him, and see what happens. But obviously, Mike Vrabel, a huge watching him in practice with all those guys. What a football brain! Forgot more football than most of us know, and he's a guy easy to root for.
Yeah, and Browns fans like the fact that he's the quote unquote football guy that they really want. All right, 3 keys for Ohio State to defeat Oregon, the Rose Bowl, college football, onto the quarterfinals, trying to get to the semifinals. Number 1 on the list, you have limit chunk plays.
We're going to see Buckeyes really struggle with chunk plays. Denzel Burke really struggled. So you had Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson. They had just a field day. Dylan Gabriel threw for almost 350 yards. They had 500, almost just under 500 yards of offense. So the first thing they got to do is they've got to play the safeties over top. They got to help Denzel Burke in man coverage. They got to make Dylan Gabriel, throw the ball short and not get these vertical chunk plays. The Oregon Ducks average completion against the Buckeyes was 14.8. That's way too much with the elite players they have on defense. Now, a couple things they didn't do. They didn't pressure, which we'll talk about, but they have got to eliminate these big plays. Play the corners off a little bit, maybe not so much press coverage. Make sure that Stewart especially has help if he's on Burke. Burke has really struggled with these sudden twitchy guys who are good in space. Burke has had some issues with it. Now, I don't think Burke is going to play like that. He had a bad game. He's a really good football player. But these Oregon receivers are really, really good. Dylan Gabriel's a guy I'm very, very high on in the draft, a lot higher on than a lot of other people. So they got to eliminate these chunk plays, these 15 to 25-yard plays, or they're going to have trouble keeping up with the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, you kind of alluded to it. Ohio State's defense just needs to play significantly better than they did in that first matchup where they gave up all the big plays. Number 2 you have on the 3 keys, and you kind of alluded to it, create pressure on Dylan Gabriel.
You can see the red circles are going to show there. So 4-man front in a circle, a couple guys who come on a blitz. So it's a 6-man blitz. And this actually got called back for a late hit, which I didn't think was a very good call, even though as an offensive guy, I like to protect the quarterbacks. But you're going to see a 6-man pressure here on 3rd and 6. And what I like about what pressure does is it speeds up the clock of the quarterback, and it leads to bad decisions. Now, it can lead to big plays as well, but what it really does is that they had 0 sacks against Oregon in the first time. He was not pressured at all game. They simulated some pressure, but for the most part brought 4, occasionally 5 against Dylan Gabriel. They're going to have to amp that up, bring 5 and 6, and get his clock sped up so he gets rid of the football faster. You combine the maybe playing some softer coverage, help on Stewart, make them throw it short, and then pressure. And I think if they can get Dylan Gabriel on the ground a little bit, get him hit, get him thinking, get that clock sped up like they did against the Tennessee kid, they'll be really good on defense. There's way too many high-level players on that defense if you gave me up 500 yards to anybody in college football. So I think that's something that you're going to see. I think you're going to see them play with their hair on fire and bring 5- and 6-man pressures a whole bunch.
All right, so the third of the 3 keys for Ohio State to win the rematch with the Oregon Ducks. Find touches for Smith.
What you're going to see here, so you're going to see the run. If you watch the linemen, you can see the linemen are going to get circled here. I'm a circle though. They're running counter here, which you can see brings up those linebackers. Now, this is a pre-snap read, and this is kind of the most simple RPO you can get. See, at the top of the screen, I circled Jeremiah Smith. And what that tells you is that if Will Howard likes to look to Smith, throw it to him. And this is what I mean by last week when we talked about not running the ball like Michigan and saying this is a great counter run. They get great movement. They ran the ball very well. but this is simply saying playing to your strengths. So if you don't like the look, so right now you got man coverage and you got the safety up top there. Safety, Will Howard knows that the safety can't get there, and he also knows the safety's probably going to step up when he reads that down block by the tackle to his side. So he knows, for the most part, he's got one-on-one coverage with Jeremiah Smith. And I thought Chip Kelly did a great job of putting him in the slot, using him in motion, throwing him the ball on quick screens. But again, finding touches for Smith. And anytime, you watch a lot, I watch a lot of film, and you watch some guys, this is a different kind of guy. This is a generational Myles Garrett at the college level kind of guy where he's just really, really good. If you think about how good he is, Abuka and Carnell Tate are going to be really, really good pros, and they're not close to as good as this guy. So this guy's an elite talent. They got to find ways to get to the ball. If they get man-to-man coverage, even on this simple RPO, this is 1st and 10. They're going to run counter. It's just tagged with a one-on-one with Smith up top. Really like this call by Chip Kelly, and this is what they got to do against Oregon if they get one-on-one coverage with Smith.
Yeah, I'm with you. The other thing, get the ball out quick because Oregon's defensive line is really good and the Buckeyes' offensive line is a little banged up. Lance Reisland, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Lance.
As always, thanks for having me.
Lance Reisland, make sure you check him out. Always really good film breakdown, video analysis, cleveland.com, as well as the pages of The Plain Dealer. Stephen Means, Buckeyes beat reporter, is in Pasadena. He is covering the Buckeyes. He'll join us next for more Ohio State football talk on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Buckeyes here on Sports4CLE. Ohio State in Pasadena has been for a few days getting ready for the college football playoff quarterfinal, also the Rose Bowl this year in Pasadena, California. Buckeyes beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, Stephen Means, has been in Pasadena covering the Buckeyes. He joins us now. And Stephen, appreciate the time. What's going on as the Buckeyes get ready Wednesday for that matchup with the Ducks?
Yeah, I think media days are always just more about vibes, right? And trying to see where people's heads are at and what the momentum could look like. And I think for Oregon, a lot of the vibes are they're leaning into this potentially being the biggest game of the year, part two. We know that first game, 32-31, they won that game. And that's what I think was the most impressive showing of the two teams who I think are the two best teams in the country. And we might get that again, just in a more historic venue at the Rose Bowl this time around. And Oregon players seem to be leaning more into that idea of how big of a deal this is, while Ohio State's really trying to business mentality. This is a work trip. We're not trying to make too much of it. And I think what you're just seeing is the contrast of two different programs, right? Ohio State's a blue blood who has long been a national championship contender and has long been in the conversation. This isn't anything new to them. This is just another step in the journey they want to take. While for Oregon, yes, they played in a national championship a decade ago. They've been in this before, but it's not their norm. They're not a blue blood. They're not a team who has got this long history of dominance in college football. And so this is maybe the peak of what Oregon football is supposed to be under Dan Lanning at this point. And so they are kind of taking it all in. It doesn't mean that they're not ready to play on Wednesday. In fact, it means that they might be a little bit more hyped up to play on Wednesday. But it is going to be interesting to see which, I guess, vibe ends up mattering more when we get to the game Wednesday. The team who maybe was a little bit more locked in and not tried to get too high or too low in the moment versus the team who is leaning all the way into how important this game is.
So I know you wrote an article. Do you think Ohio State's preparing for another air show from Oregon?
I do. I mean, the last time these two teams played, both quarterbacks were over 300 yards. I think that's what it takes to win these types of games is you've got to score points. You've got to be able to generate offense. And a lot of times it can come down to whose quarterback outplayed the other quarterback. And I think in a lot of ways, Dylan Gabriel ended up winning that matchup the last time. You remember the long touchdown run he had. He also just made less mistakes than what Will Howard made. And so Ohio State showed us their formula. In fact, we all knew the formula. They just needed to go do it against Tennessee. That should be the formula again against Oregon, but also Oregon is a team who also should probably be using that formula. So I expect both of these teams to be trying to find ways to be explosive on offense.
Another article that you've written leading up to the Rose Bowl in this college football playoff quarterfinal matchup. Important X factor for Ohio State. What do you think it is?
Oh boy, there's a lot of things there. I think it's another thing there's just so many contrasts and so many ways that you can compare these two programs. Oregon's been off for a month because it took care of business for 12 games, and then it went and won the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State could have been in that position had they beaten Michigan and gotten a rematch against Oregon in Indianapolis and maybe put themselves in position to get a bye. But that's not how their journey has played out. They ended up losing to Michigan, not getting to the Big Ten championship game. And so they needed to go beat Tennessee at home to get to this game. So they earned the right to be here, just a very different way. And so now it's a conversation of rust versus rest, which is a tale as old as time when you're talking about sports. Oregon, who did kind of have I wouldn't say tough schedule, but a not ideal schedule, having to play 8 straight Big Ten games before you got a bye week. They probably did need an opportunity to just kind of take a step back, take their foot off the pedal a little bit and regroup. And they've gotten that over the past month, while Ohio State needed, after what happened to Michigan, to get right back on the field against Tennessee, put up a great showing, and also just kind of flip some momentum in their favor and rewrite the narrative a little bit. And they also did that. So now the question of, here we are again, 2 months after that first meeting where it literally came down to, did Will Howard get down quick enough or not? What's been more important in winning this game? Ohio State building the type of momentum you might need to make a run in a playoff like this, or Oregon getting the necessary rest so that they're the best versions of themselves heading into a playoff format like this?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Really, this will be the first time you get the rest versus rust question in a college football playoff. Do you expect – I look at the coaching staff for Ohio State. I think Ryan Day is a good football coach. I know the Michigan issue is the Michigan issue. I think he's a good football coach. I think Chip Kelly's a good football coach. Do you expect them to come up with some – they've played each other. These two teams know each other. Do you expect them to come up with some adjustments based on what they saw in that first game? Or is it, hey, we just need to do what we do well?
I think it's a little bit of both of those things. And Ryan Day and Dan Lanning have both hinted at the fact that these teams are very different than the last time they played against each other against Oregon. Jordan Burch didn't play when they played Ohio State. He will play in this game. Ohio State's offensive line looked drastically different against Oregon than it's going to look into this game. They've on like variation number 7 of this offensive line after a series of injuries now. So it starts there. So there's some schematic things that have to change after that. But then also you've learned some things, some guys have developed. Plus, the approach has to be different for Ohio State. I think what we saw against Tennessee is what's required to win these games, not what we saw against Michigan, where they tried to run the ball and it didn't necessarily work. That's not going to work in this game. So, yes, there are things, I think, from that October 12th game that both of those teams can go, okay, that worked in that game. That'll probably work today. But I think there's also just, as the season progresses, you've seen some changes in personnel in terms of who's just available for both of these teams. That might change some things. So I don't expect it to look the exact same way, but I do expect it to look the exact same way, if you don't understand what I mean. It's going to be a competitive back and forth game, but I don't think they're going to have the same exact game plans that we saw 2 months ago.
Ohio State's front seven, to me, is playing very differently than they did against Oregon. They really have kind of taken a step to where you thought they might be based on the personnel. Do you get that same vibe that they're playing as well as we've seen them all season?
I do. And some of that is schematically, Jim Knowles has changed some things up since that loss to Oregon. They've essentially spent the last few 4, 5, 6, 7 games since that game revamping some things to see what we saw against Tennessee. But also guys are just playing better. This is lazy analysis. But sometimes I think we try to overthink things that are very simple and in our face. Why did Ohio State's defense play so poorly against Oregon? Well, because you've got 11 guys who you can make a case for all of them at some point whether it's this April or next April or the following April, are going to hear their name called on NFL Draft Night. And maybe two of them actually played like they're future NFL players. Meanwhile, Oregon's NFL players played like NFL players. So, logically speaking here, what if Ohio State's 11 NFL players on defense play like they're 11 NFL players? Maybe you get a different result. It doesn't mean that it's the difference between losing a game by 1 point and beating a team by 30 points, but it does mean you give yourself the best opportunity to do that. And that starts with Denzel Burke and Davis and Igbenogson in coverage. It starts in the front seven with Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau being, what if they're 75% of what they were against Tennessee? That's pretty darn good. What if Cody Simon and Sonny Styles have continued to develop to the point that they're two of the best linebackers in the country? What if Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs play like they're the best safety tandem in the country? What if Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton play at a high level? A lot of things just did not happen in Ohio State's favor the first time they played against Oregon. But one of the main things was they didn't do what they could control, and that's play well. And you lost by 1 point. So let's start there. All these guys that we made a big deal about, the fact that they came back and put off the NFL, how about you guys play like guys who could be in the NFL this year? And maybe we see a different result on Wednesday.
All right, before I let you go, what concerns you most about Oregon? You know, if you were going to say, man, if this happens, Buckeyes are in trouble.
Definitely the defensive line, just simply because Ohio State's offensive line is pulling for strings at this point. They're just trying to get the best out of guys who were not at all expecting to be playing meaningful snaps in December and January. That's just the reality of the situation. You weren't expecting Luke Montgomery and Tegra Shabola and Austin Saravel to be rotating at guard. When you're heading into a quarterfinal college football playoff game, you were expecting Donovan Jackson to be your left guard, and you were expecting one of those three to emerge as your right guard and be your starter and spend the last 13 games developing to the point that he's ready for this moment. You weren't expecting Carson Hinsman to be your starting center. You were expecting Seth McLaughlin to be your starting center. Well, he's rolling around on a scooter because he tore his Achilles. You were expecting Josh Simmons to be your left tackle. And, well, now Donovan Jackson is because Josh Simmons has a knee injury. So a lot's just changed. Meanwhile, Oregon's got maybe 3 NFL players on their defensive line. It's not like Penn State or like Tennessee or like Indiana where it's one guy. And if you shut him down, you might be able to take out the entire line. No, Jordan Birch and Mateo Uyunglele and Derek Harmon are all very good elite football players. And so when you put that up against a group that is very much compromised, can Ohio State, can Ryan Day and Chip Kelly scheme it up in a way where that doesn't end up costing them the game?
Yeah, I'm with you. You know what? I liked the tunnel screens, and I like getting the ball out quick because you're going to have to. Stephen, I appreciate you taking some time out from covering the Buckeyes in Pasadena to join us. Thanks very much. Appreciate it, man.
Anytime.
Stephen Means, make sure you check him out. Great Buckeyes coverage. He is in Pasadena, and we'll have plenty of stories, Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com, leading up to the Rose Bowl college football quarterfinal matchup between Ohio State and Oregon. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here not tomorrow and not Wednesday, but Thursday on Sports for CLE.